Justice served in an honest fight. True crime tales till the verdict's right. Solving more than just trivial quests, where sentences rule at the defense rests.
All right, Mr. Fogus, go ahead and call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please, the court counsel, state calls Ted Wiley.
Discussions this morning, I think we are leaning toward not coming back Thursday afternoon, so we'll break at noon for the day is what I think there's some things the lawyers need to work on before that make sense as we go. So that's the current plan. I'll finalize that and let y'all know.
Mr. Wiley, you raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear affirm the evidence you're about to present in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead and lower your hand. Good morning.
Morning.
You do not want to be here today, do you?
No, sir.
That's fair. We've subpoenaed you to come in from Alabama, is that right?
Yes, sir.
If you would, state your full name for the record and spell it for us.
Ted Wiley, TED, ALWYLIE.
Go ahead and scoot up and pull the microphone down towards you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wiley, I'm not trying to embarrass you or do anything, but you know why you're here today.
Yes, sir.
And you understand it's a murder case, and that's why we've asked you to be here.
Yes, sir.
Do you see Melody Walker Farris in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Would you point out, please? Is she sitting over here in the
Yes,
black?
sir.
That's black. How old are you today, sir?
60.
And when did you first meet the defendant?
It's probably been maybe 85,
And
86, something like that.
when did you meet Gary's sister, Sherry Farris?
Around that same time,
And how long were you and Sherry Farris in a relationship?
probably 20 years.
During that time, did you meet the defendant?
Yes, sir.
Did y'all ride horses?
Move the. No, I'm not talking.
Okay.
Let's move the easel so the juror can see. Just back it up.
Yeah.
You'll need to pull it out.
All right, Mr. Wiley, you got a soft voice. If you speak in that microphone so we can hear you. So you met the defendant through Sherry Farris, is that how?
Yes, sir.
Did y'all ride horses together or things like that?
We have.
And where did y'all first meet? Was it in Georgia or was it somewhere else?
No, we would see each other at Christmas and birthdays and Thanksgiving and things at Sherry's mother's.
Now, again, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but at some point, did you have a romantic relationship with the defendant?
Yes, sir.
And when did that start?
I can't tell you the exact dates, but it was probably in 2008 or 10, somewhere in that range.
And when y'all would meet and come together, where would y'all meet?
She's usually coming through town, either going to her friend Sheila's Hutchinson's home, or she would be going to visit her mom at the hospital.
And how long did this romantic affair go on?
Probably 3 or 4 years.
And during that time, do you know whether or not Gary knew about the relationship?
I don't think anyone actually knew about it ever until this happened.
And it was after this that it came out.
I think it did. Then they had were suspicious and things, but I don't think that they actually knew. They had no knowledge of it.
And to be clear, it was an intimate relationship more than just friends. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
How many times do you think, how often would you see each other when y'all were together, you and the defendant?
We would see each other at that particular time Before that time, we'd only see each other Christmas and Thanksgiving, but at that time, we might see each other twice a month.
Would y'all meet in motels, hotels, or somewhere else?
We did a time or two.
Would she come to your house and stay at all?
She did.
Was there a time when you remember that she separated from Gary and spent more time with you?
She did. She never stayed more than like a week or something like that. But we were snowed in one time, and her friend Sheila stayed with me. And so, anyway,
Was that Sheila or Sherry?
Sheila Hutchinson was her friend.
Were you ever confronted by anybody about the affair?
No, sir.
Gary never said anything to you?
He did not know. He had suspicion maybe at the end.
Now, you've heard us talk about the $50,000 loan or whatever you want to call it. Are you familiar with that idea?
I wasn't involved in that. I don't know about that.
What I want to ask you, though, is during the time, did the defendant write you checks for things?
She did help me with payroll once or twice.
And how much money during that time did she give you?
It was a few $1,000s to make payroll.
Would it be closer to $10,000 or closer to a few $1,000s?
It could have been 6,000 or 8,000, somewhere like that, to make payroll.
And that was in 2000, I believe 2009. Would that be right?
I'm thinking so.
Is it true though that she did write you several checks that were worth several $1,000s?
Yes, sir.
And you said it was for payroll. Tell us about that.
I have a building company. I had a building company at that time.
Did you ever use that money for anything with Kay Walker, her mother?
I'm sure I probably did.
Did you ever say it was for that, but it was for something else?
I don't think that I did.
So is it closer to 10,000 or closer to 15,000? What do you remember?
I'm sure it's closer to 10 than 15. I don't know that.
And she would write you personal checks for this?
She has.
How many checks do you think she's given you in any shape or form? How many checks has she
Probably
written?
not more than 2 or 3.
Do you know if she ever had more money than that?
She told me that she did. I think it was maybe when she was handling her mother's affairs or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Did she tell you whether or not she took that out of the account that she and Gary had over the house or something?
I don't remember all that now. I don't remember that.
How much money do you remember her having independently from Gary when they separated?
I don't know about her finances and things.
How long was she separated that you know of where she was not with Gary during this time?
I think it might have been maybe a month. I don't know that for a fact.
You don't know exactly how long it was?
No, sir. Like I said, she would come into town and then she would go on to her friend Sheila's house or something along those lines, or go somewhere else.
And was she coming up, was it under the guise that she was there to visit her mother, help her mother, but she was seeing you?
Oh, she was helping her mother. Her and Sheila helped her mother get healed up. She had heart surgery and got her back, on the mend.
But she would come up and see you too.
Yes, sir.
And are you saying that the affair itself lasted for 3 years or more than 3 years?
I would say somewhere around the 3 to 4 year mark.
Closer to the 4, maybe?
Maybe so. I didn't keep up with that.
Did she ever tell you that Gary was, because of this, started to control the finances or do anything from the finances?
I think he did that all along.
And did she talk about how she did not have money except for what Gary would give her?
We didn't talk about money much.
She talk about leaving Gary at any time?
She did say he served her with divorce papers, or was serving her with divorce papers.
And you knew that was because of y'all's relationship?
I don't know that it was because of our relationship.
Did you ask?
I did not.
You kind of just let it be?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know whether or not that was followed through or anything?
I don't know.
Now, when did it end?
Probably I think it was 4 years before this happened.
This was in July of 2018, so y'all's relationship was over in about 4 years before.
Yes, sir.
So
Well,
2018.
I just didn't hear from her. I don't know that it was over. I just didn't hear from her anymore.
It just kind of dissipated.
Yes, sir.
So about 4 years before 2018. So sometime around 2014 is when your relationship with the defendant stopped.
I hadn't seen her or talked to her before that.
So since 2014, give or take, have you had any communication with the defendant?
I talked with her. She came into town one time after Gary passed.
And that's it?
Yes, sir.
So you understand one of the reasons I have you here is that your name was brought up in the investigation as a former, if you would, boyfriend of the defendant.
Yes.
So I want to make sure I'm shrinking the world. I want to make sure the jury hears this from you
Yes,
and they see you. In July, this is Riley 1. This is calendar July 2018. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Can you positively look at this jury and tell them that in July of 2018, you didn't step a foot into the state of Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Did you have anything whatsoever to do with and I'm not saying you are, I just want to hear from you. You didn't have anything to do with what happened to Gary, or know anything about what happened to Gary?
No, sir.
You weren't even in the state?
No, sir. I was not.
Did you have any communication with the defendant or anybody in her family about what happened?
No, sir.
It's not till we contacted you, someone from the district attorney's office years ago, I think, reached out to you?
Well, I think I talked with Sherry about that. That was about it.
So if this occurred, it did occur in July 2018. Gary was killed in July 2018. When was the last time you were physically, in any shape or form, in the state of Georgia?
It'd have to be 4 years before that.
Nothing else, no.
Reader?
Mr. Wiley,
Yes, sir.
my name is John Luke Weaver, and I, along with Michael Ray, represent Melody.
Judge, I apologize. The juror just indicated to me that she couldn't hear. Please speak to my phone.
Speak up, speak up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is John Luke Weaver, and I represent Melody. Got a few questions for you on timeline. So you guys were together, you think, between 2007 and maybe 2010?
Something like that.
Something like that, because you said 14, but it'd be more like 2007 to 2010. Right?
Probably so.
Okay, all right. And the state mentioned something about some money that Melody loaned you $6,000 to $8,000, and you paid it back to her, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'm just going to ask you. I mean, y'all didn't really talk about Gary at all, did you?
No, sir.
And Gary never had any crosswords with you at all
Never.
about any of this.
Never.
And y'all didn't talk about it at all.
Never.
Any of her kids have any crosswords with you ever? Scott or Chris?
No, sir.
And so really you hadn't seen Melody since 2010. It's been about, 14 years?
Yes, sir. I'm guessing that's correct.
Somewhere in there?
Yes, sir.
And it just fizzled out?
We just went different ways, I guess.
Nothing, y'all didn't talk about Gary or anything to do with Gary?
No, sir.
If I may have a few moments, Judge. That's all.
Reader, right?
No, Your Honor.
All right, you can sit down. Thank you, sir.
You just may be released.
Go ahead. That's fine.
Okay.
Call our next witness.
Judge, we call Christine Lavoy. You solemnly swear from the evidence you about to present in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Go ahead, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Go ahead and tell us your full name, where do you work, and what do you do?
My name is Christine Lavoie, Christine Lavoie. I work for the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Division of Forensic Science, and I'm a forensic DNA analyst.
Judge, you have the remote control for the TVs? You can turn those on, please, John. Yes, John. Ms. Lavoie, what is your expertise at the GBI?
So I perform DNA analysis on evidence.
And if you would, we've heard yesterday from Ms. Norris, but if you would, just when it comes to DNA analysis, how long have you been doing it?
About 9.5 years.
And what's your educational background?
I have a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology from Mississippi University for Women, and I also have a Master of Science with a concentration in biochemistry from Mississippi State University.
Do you have to have a master's degree to work at the GBI to be a scientist as you are?
No,
But you have to have some type of bachelor's degree to work at the crime lab?
correct, a bachelor's in life science.
And when you came on to the GBI, did you go through the hiring process to take an exam to get on and make sure you're qualified to do the job?
Yes,
Do you have to take continuing education through the year to make sure you keep up with the current trends in science in your expertise?
yes,
Are you a member of any professional organizations or anything like that?
yes. I'm a member of the Southwestern Association of Forensic Scientists and the Society of Molecular Biology and Evolution.
Among the people at the crime lab, where are you when it comes to how long you've been there and experience? You have more experience than other people, less experience, where do you fall in that?
I'm considered a senior analyst.
And is that supervision or what makes you a senior analyst?
I hold the title of a crime lab scientist 3 senior.
Do you teach and train other people how to do their jobs?
Yes,
And do you do any outside teaching or education as part of your job?
not outside, no.
Are you part of any kind of scientific groups or anything that works on the cutting edge or new technology or new science that comes out?
No,
Have you ever testified as an expert before in the courts in the state of Georgia?
yes,
How many times have you been labeled an expert in DNA?
about 90 times.
And just this time, I tend to witness an expert in the science related to DNA.
Okay. All right. Witness deemed to be an expert, as I told you before, you can give a opinion testimony based upon her experience, all right?
All right, so we've gotten through the foundation. You did actually just a couple things, and we're going to have you look at some of the reports. I think you're covering some of others, if I remember correctly. Have you had an opportunity to go back and look at some of the reports in the case?
I've looked at my reports.
And I think you did. So we have 2 reports, GBI DOFS 7 and GBI DOFS 13. Are those your 2, the ones which is a DNA typing? Excuse me. GBI DOS 14 and then the DNA typing, the true allele. Those your reports?
Yes,
Because this time I tender GBI DOFS 7 and 14 into evidence.
All right, injections. All right, very good.
You have a copy of your reports with you?
I do.
All right, let's go through those quickly. We've stipulated the reports. That's why we don't have to go through all the regular procedures we do at trial. If you don't mind, let's just walk through these. Let's begin with 7. What type of services was requested in this?
It was a DNA typing,
And what was the date of the report?
March 6, 2019.
We'll be looking at GBI. We discussed yesterday as GBI item 6 and GBI item 31. I think we'll begin with those. So if you could, tell us the results and inclusion. Begin here with the sentence that says the DNA obtained from the cutting. Read that if you would for us.
The DNA the DNA obtained from the cutting contained the DNA profiles of at least 2 individuals.
All right, 6 was the T-shirt that we have in the case, and 31, that would just be a cutting from that T-shirt, is that right?
Correct.
And when you begin DNA testing, how do you know how many individuals or profiles you find? How does that work? Just kind of briefly tell us how you can determine that.
So when you look at a DNA profile, you see what looks like peaks along a line. And if there's only one person present, you'll see no more than 2 peaks at each location that you test. When there's 2 individuals, you'll see no more than 4 peaks at each location.
Here we have 2 profiles, is that right?
At least 2, yes.
Now, when you looked at the shirt, the garnet shirt or the red shirt that the jury has seen, it came back to a matching somebody. Who did it match?
The major profile matched Melody Farris.
And what was that frequency, the statistical numbers?
It was 1 in 4 octillion.
And do you know how many zeros that is?
It would be a 4 with 27 zeros.
Now, at this point, when you were looking at it, down at the bottom of your report, it says it may be possible to draw conclusions on all contributors from the cutting recovered from item 6. So 6 is the T-shirt, item 31 is the cutting, utilizing True Allele casework software. What is True Allele?
So True Allele is a software program that we use to help us interpret mixtures.
And how is it, what is the basic, if I said in the beginning 10 years ago and we're doing DNA testing, what type of testing did we do 10 years ago? If I said the regular DNA testing, what is that, STR or?
STR, yes.
So that's just what everybody's been doing for years and years, so that would be the regular type of testing?
We still do STR. It was still done in this case.
Right. So your first test is kind of the regular DNA test. What I need you to get across to the jury is, how is True Allele different? How is it more advanced or a different stage? How does it distinguish between just a DNA test?
So, like I said, True Allele is used for mixtures. In this case, the minor profile, I wasn't able to perform any comparisons because it was just so limited. True Allele has the capability of, I'm going to use an analogy. If you think about an iceberg, you can see, a human can see the portion of the ice above the surface of the ocean. But we can't see what's below the ocean, below the surface of the ocean. True Allele can look below the surface as well as above the surface. So it can see the whole mixture, if you will.
Is it a mathematical probability that uses a formula and software to compute things?
Yes.
Is it, I don't know if the term is more accurate or more detailed. How is True Allele actually, how is it more capable of getting things that you cannot just find under regular DNA testing?
That's how the software is designed.
And what does it do when it comes to known and unknown? How is it objectively doing an analysis of the DNA?
So True Allele will interpret the mixture first, and then it will perform comparisons to a reference sample.
Let's look at your report 14 here, GBI and DOFS 14. What is the requested service here?
It's True Allele,
And what's the report date?
November 15th, 2023.
Now, for your second test that you did, you are still testing item 6, the T-shirt, and 31, the cutting from the T-shirt. Is that right?
Yes, specifically it's the electronic data that's previously been generated.
And what we asked, our office asked you to, once you notified us in your first report that maybe True Allele could actually help us identify the other contributor, we asked you to test it further using True Allele. Is that right?
Correct.
And we're trying to see who the other contributor is. When you tested under True Allele, tell us what the results were as seen in your report here.
So the cutting, once again, contained a mixture of at least 2 individuals, and there was a match identified between the data from the cutting and Melody Farris, and a match between the data obtained and Melody Farris is approximately 500 septillion times more probable than a coincidental match to an unrelated person in the population. But due to limited data, True Allele could not make a determination as to who who the minor contributor was.
So for the true allele testing, it came back even stronger that it was the defendant's DNA.
So this is a likelihood ratio, whereas the other statistic was a frequency, but 500 septillion is less than 4 octillion.
So it produced a less numbers, but it still showed that it was those many zeros would be. Now proceed, John. Go ahead. Again, apologize, it's rules of evidence come up. All right, so the second test still confirmed, based on how many zeros you have, septillion, that the major contributor was Melody Farris. Is that right?
Correct.
And then you could not determine, even with true allele, who the second or minor contributor of DNA is on the shirt. Is that right?
That's correct.
Can you say that there was DNA of someone else?
Yes.
So is it accurate, scientifically speaking, that there are two DNAs that we found on the shirt, and one is not the defendant's,
Correct.
but you just can't determine who it is?
Correct.
Can you determine if it's a male or female?
No, it was so limited, I couldn't even determine the sex.
Only that it was not hers.
Correct.
Nothing further, Judge.
All right, were you right? Or Cross? Sorry.
Good morning, Ms. Lloyd. My name is Michael Ray. I represent Ms. Farris. Just a few quick things for you. So just so I understand, you had a shirt and that was item number 6, correct?
Correct.
Right. And then somebody at your office at the GBI, they got a hole into that shirt and took a piece out, right? And that is item number 31.
Correct.
Right. And then there was originally a test done on that and it found 2 DNA samples, correct?
Correct.
And then they sent it to you to see if you could separate them out to see who both the samples are.
Correct.
You found one to be Ms. Farris.
Yes.
Okay. Are you aware that that is Ms. Farris's t-shirt? And you may not know.
I don't recall.
Okay. If it was her t-shirt, would you be surprised to find somebody's DNA on their own clothing?
No.
Okay. Now, with the True Allele program, it's a computer program, correct?
Yes.
And it runs on, I believe it's called probabilistic genotyping.
Correct.
And somehow, and we don't got to get into how, because I don't care, but somehow that separates out and you can determine 2 mixed together types of DNA.
Yes.
Somewhat. Okay. Now, the other DNA that you found, according to your report at the bottom, was due to limited data, no conclusive determination can be made. So does that mean that it's such a small amount of DNA you can't separate it out?
It's such a small amount, True Allele couldn't perform any comparisons.
Okay, so it couldn't do anything with it.
Correct.
Okay, and in fact, it can't determine what type of DNA it is, whether it's skin, sweat, blood, semen, anything like that.
So True Allele can't, but I do have an opinion, if I can express that.
No, I'm just asking about True Allele.
Okay.
True Allele
True
can't do
Allele
that.
cannot.
Okay. Okay. And that's all I have, Judge.
I have a question. All right. If a child gets their DNA from their parents, yes?
Yes.
All right. And so you have the chromosomes from one parent, chromosomes from the other parent. What if there's a mixture from the two parents and the child, and there are 3 combined DNAs? How can it parse that out and tell the difference between the child and the parents?
So there would still be differences in the DNA
All right. How is that?
because the child only inherits 50% from each parent.
So the 2 other grandparents don't get passed down, or it gets combined and then doesn't get passed down.
There could be some similarities.
Okay. I know enough just to be dangerous. That was really more for my information than anything else. All right.
Well, just one thing, just to follow.
Go ahead.
With DNA typing, you can, to make it two ways, you can distinguish between parents and children.
Yes.
And if the only way that you couldn't distinguish it if you had identical siblings.
Correct.
That-
That's what I've been told, but I don't understand. That's why I'm up here and not over there. All right. You can be excused.
Thank you.
All right. Our next witness.
Emily Bagwell.
I'll stand up and stretch. You're in the speed dating phase.
Hey, just go stand up there if you would, and I'll swear you in, then you can see. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear and affirm the evidence you're about to present in this matter shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. Say your full name for the record.
Emily Bagwell, Bagwell.
Ms. Bagwell, where do you work and what do you do?
I work at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation in the Division of Forensic Sciences, and I'm the technical leader of the firearm and toolmark section.
So you deal with guns day in, day out, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury if you would, your educational background that qualifies you to do what you do.
I have an Associates of Science degree from Young Harris College, a Bachelor's of Biology degree from Kennesaw State University, and a Master's degree of Forensic Sciences from Stevenson University, which is in Baltimore, Maryland.
So how did you get interested in doing being a firearm scientist?
While I was a graduate student in Baltimore, I reached out to the local crime lab, the Maryland State Police Forensics Laboratory, and they had an opening for an intern in their fireman toolmark section.
Did you grow up shooting firearms, things like that, or was it just kind of something else you got interested in?
No, sir, just a career path.
Are you someone that is a collector of guns or anything like that?
Maybe now I am.
Do you enjoy the science aspect of what you do?
Yes, sir, very much.
At the GBI, when guns come in, how many guns do you think y'all are testing a year?
Well, we pick up evidence from our evidence receiving section every day. If there's 1 gun or 15 guns, it would be difficult to quantify, but we do typically pick up evidence every day. There's always something for us that's firearms related to pick up. It's hard to quantify how many cases we're releasing every year, but we see quite a few.
And how long have you been doing this with the GBI?
Since December of 2015.
And how many firearm scientists does the GBI have?
We currently have 22 reporting analysts across the state.
Where are they stationed at? Where are their offices?
We have we have 7 regional laboratories. 3 of those, well, in addition to headquarters, 3 of those perform firearms and toolmark services. So that's going to be our headquarters lab in Decatur, our Western lab in Midland, which is close to Columbus, and our coastal lab in Pooler, which is close to Savannah.
Which office do you work out of?
I work at headquarters.
Does the GBI headquarters have a warehouse or something where they hold the firearms? How many firearms do y'all have in y'all's property now?
Well, there's a combination because we have evidence where firearms are evidence, and we also have an in-house reference collection. Both of those other laboratories in Columbus and Savannah also have their own reference collection. I don't know how many firearms we have in our reference collection, but where we store our reference collection of firearms is also one of our storage locations for evidence inside of our section. But additionally, we have evidence storage in our evidence receiving section, as well as a long-term storage facility in our vault, basically downstairs in what we call the crypt at headquarters.
Is it a bunch?
It's a bunch.
How much do you think y'all got?
Just in the reference collection, we should have probably over 650 in the state. But that doesn't include any of the evidence that are all packaged in boxes that we'll eventually analyze.
If the jury could go to your office and see what you do, what's your office like?
Just my personal office.
Like where you test firearms and things like that?
So our laboratory, it's not like your conventional forensic testing laboratory, but it's still a forensic testing laboratory. The firearms section is on the second floor at the headquarters building. And we have about, I would say, 3 wings where we have some offices where you don't share with someone. I do not share an office as the technical leader. Both of our managers have their own offices. Some of the senior examiners have their own offices, but a lot of people bunk up, and there are 2 people in an office just because we have a lot of people. We have 2 areas where we conduct our test firing. So we have a shooting range where we'll shoot shotguns for just kind of shooting shotguns. We do not collect projectiles from shotguns, so we kind of just shoot those into the air in the range and collect fired cartridge cases. Also in our range is a test firing capture system called the Cotton Box. That's for shooting high-powered firearms such as rifles. So they're shot in the range. Across the hall from the range is our tank room. It houses all of our reference ammunition, which is all across the walls. And then on the back wall of the tank room is a 600-gallon water tank. It's a large rectangular metal box with 600 gallons of water, and that's how we capture our handgun test-fired bullets.
Have you testified in the courts of the state of Georgia as an expert before?
I have
How many times have you been labeled an expert in firearm science?
87.
Just this time I tendered the witness as an expert related to firearm science.
All right. Again, she's been tendered as an expert witness.
All right, we've got that out of the way, so let's talk about the case. In this case, we've asked you to you're going to be looking at, I believe, 2 reports. And I believe you did one of them, then Vanna Kelly did the other one. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And by stipulation, we've agreed to these reports and the contents, and we've agreed that you can handle the questions relating to both of those. When you test guns, as in the testing that's done in this case, can you just kind of tell the jury what type of tests were done on a firearms and also the ammunition that is related to your report?
So more specifically, on the first report that was authored by Vanna Kelly, there weren't any firearms that were provided, but she received fired bullets. So when you submit evidence to the crime lab for firearms analysis, what that would include is a microscopic comparison of fired ammunition components. The purpose of it, the whole purpose of firearms identification, is to determine if fired ammunition components came from the same firearm, different firearms, if a firearm is submitted, if it came from that firearm, or if it didn't. So in this case, those ammunition components were compared to each other to make that determination. Were they fired from the same firearm? Did they possess characteristics that could allow us to inform our customer if there was a list of possible firearms they could be looking for in terms of an investigation? And then later we received additional evidence, a lot of additional evidence that I examined, a lot of fired bullets. At that point, we had reached an agreement with the customer. We wouldn't do any microscopic comparison because there were so many and they had sustained a lot of damage. We wanted to turn some results around quickly, so what we did was we looked at those characteristics that were shared between these fired bullets to determine if there was a list of possible firearms that could have fired them, and to answer a question if any of them were a specific caliber. There was also a firearm that was submitted at the time that I did do a visual examination of, but it didn't have any characteristics in agreement with anything prior submitted for Ms. Vanna Kelly's report or the evidence that I was going to examine during my analysis. We weren't doing any comparison on my part, so we we did what we had agreed with the customer.
And what was the caliber that we were interested in this case?
38.
So 38 special, 38 caliber is what we were looking for. Is that right?
38 special is a specific 38 caliber. There's also a 38 caliber called 357 Magnum. And then there are some other specific calibers within that caliber family as well, such as 38 Smith & Wesson and 9mm. But typically when something looks like it's just 38, it's probably going to be 38 special or 38 or 357 Magnum. Apologies.
Now, when we're talking about revolvers, let's go from smaller to larger. 22 revolver, 32 revolver, 38 special revolver, 357, 44. Is that kind of how it goes?
Yes, sir. That's pretty accurate. The 38 special and the 357 Magnum are closely related. They're a lot of, anytime a firearm says it is 357 Magnum, it can also shoot 38 special. So the difference is going to be the length of the chamber. A 357 Magnum chamber is going to be a little bit longer, so it can accommodate a 38 special cartridge, which is a little shorter than a 357 Magnum. But in terms of like their barrel diameters, they're the same.
So the bigger caliber gun can shoot the smaller caliber bullet, but not vice versa.
In this case, because they have the same diameter, but like you mentioned with the 44, it's going to be much larger. It's not supposed to shoot something like a 38 class that's a lot smaller. But the 357 Magnum is a specific caliber of a 38. So it's just a little bit larger than a 38, but the diameter is the same. So the 38 special will fit in a 357 Magnum chamber, but the opposite is not true because the 357 is too long, too large for the 38.
And then when I say semi-automatic handguns, we talk about 380, 9mm, 40, 45. I guess there's a 10mm some people shoot, but those are usually the type of gun that you put a magazine in and rack. Is that right?
That's correct.
So first of all, I don't know how you do it, but if someone would ask you a pistol or firearms, to me, is it a long weapon, a long gun, or a handgun? Do you kind of do that? Do you
Yeah, those
break
are the
them
two.
up?
Yes, sir. Those are the two basic categories of firearms, are those that are short and intended to be fired with one hand, and those that are longer and are intended to be fired from the shoulder.
And when you get into the handguns or the pistols, do you break those down into two major, so the genus and species? Genus is the handguns and species, the different types. You break those down into revolvers versus semi-automatic.
Yeah, revolvers versus pistols.
And so when you say pistol, you're talking about semi-automatic usually?
Usually they're supposed to be semi-automatic, but with the world that we're in, they can be converted to fire fully auto.
All right, now, this time, Judge, I'm tendering to evidence GBI DOFS report 12 and 13. Let's talk about one that's not your report, GBI DOFS 12, and this is going to be Vanna Kelly report. What was the service requested in this?
This was a firearms analysis service.
And what was the date of the report?
This report was issued on October 31st of 2019.
And we see Melody, Scott, and Gary Farris's names here, and then, so it's from them involved in this Cherokee County case. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Evidence. GBI item, don't worry about all those other numbers, 2 and 5. Tell the jury what item 2 is and item 5.
Item 2 is a 38 caliber bullet that Vanna remarked as being removed from the basement floor. The package would have indicated that. And then item 5 is a 38 bullet jacket.
And when it comes to item 5, obviously here we're talking about the jacket that came from the medical examiner's office. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the bullet from the floor, then the jacket, and the jury's heard about the bullet in the ribs and things like that. Do you know much about this case?
As the peer reviewer, all I know is how Ms. Kelly would have documented it, and she only documented the item 5 as being removed from the medical examiner's box.
All right. Can you give us the opinion for this report? Just read that to us.
Yes, sir. So under the results and conclusions, it states that microscopic examination and comparison of the bullet and bullet jacket, our items 2 and 5, reveal that they were fired from the same firearm based on agreement of class and individual characteristics. And they are consistent with being fired from FIE, Arminius, and Titan 38 special revolvers, and RG 38 special Derringers. The list provided of those manufacturers is only an investigative lead, and it is not intended to be an all-inclusive list.
All right, in plain English, what does that mean?
So these two ammunition components were projectile components. One was an intact bullet. The other one was a bullet jacket, which just means that the inside core of the bullet was not with the jacket. Those two items were fired from the same firearm, so one firearm. That firearm that they could have been fired from based on the characteristics the bullets possessed could be that list that she provided in her report, but it's not an all-inclusive list, meaning those characteristics between those two projectile items could have also been fired from different firearms not included in this list. We narrow our list based on what we most commonly see at the laboratory.
All right, so fired from the same firearm.
Yes, sir.
And then trying to figure out, based on science, it could be the same firearm, but it could be one of those brands.
Yes, one of those manufacturers may have manufactured the firearm that fired both of these items.
We don't see a 357 on that list. Is there a reason why?
I'm not sure. It could be that they did not populate in the database that she put her measurable bullet data in, but I don't know.
Could also be that it's just not one of the guns that it came back to.
Yes,
But we know from the science that the opinion is that it was fired. It was a 38 special, same gun. It could be one of those brands. Is that right?
yes, sir.
Anything about the type of bullet, the brand of bullet, or anything like that?
Ms. Kelly documented that they were consistent with being manufactured by Hornady, which is an ammunition manufacturer.
And Hornady, now again, I really want to ask you if you hunt and things like that, but I'll try to forego that. Do you ever go to Walmart and just go over like I do and just look at all the bullets?
Yes, I do, because I want to stay on top of what new ammunition might be out on the market so I can share it with my team.
You ever go to other gun stores and just see all the expensive bullets they have?
Yes,
Now, are you familiar with brands of bullets that come out of Russia?
I am.
Well, what if I say give some common names of bullets, cheap bullets that come out of Russia or something like that? What comes to mind?
The first primary company is JSC Barnoul, which is manufactured in Russia and comes into the U.S. under the umbrella company Monarch.
Okay. How about some other brands that are not you familiar with Remington?
Yes, sir.
How about there's some blue boxes out there. I'm trying to remember the name of the blue boxes. What are all the type of firearm or ammunition that you're familiar with that's not Hornady? Hornady is expensive ammunition, is it not?
It can be expensive, and half of their ammunition is geared towards law enforcement officers as well.
Okay. And so those are actually, let's put that on the far end, expensive, nice rounds that don't have a lot of powder and things like that. Good bullets. Coming back this way, what are some other brands that you're familiar with?
Specifically in blue boxes, we have PPU, Spear, CCI. As some other bullet manufacturers, we also have Federal, American Eagle, and Winchester, which are more affordable lines of ammunition.
American Eagle, that's a Federal brand.
Yes, sir.
What kind of box is that?
It should be white and red.
Do you mind standing up? Can you see that box right there in front of you on the table? If you can, I'll go pick it up. Let me go pick it up. Let me do that. It's kind of hard to. I don't have my glasses. So Scott 201, familiar with that?
Yes, I am. It's okay.
I apologize. And Scott 202, familiar with American Eagle?
Yes, I am.
That is not Hornady, is it?
No, it is not.
Totally different company?
Yes.
Totally different types of, separate, not connected at all, competition, in fact. Is that right?
As far as I know, yes, they're not related at all.
And Hornady, would you consider it a higher, I won't say quality, I'm not trying to diminish theirs, but a more expensive bullet that's commonly used for not just target shooting?
I would consider Hornady as a premium line of ammunition.
And Hornady has, in those bullets, sometimes they have that, looks like, I call it wax, I'm sure it's not wax, but they put something in the hollow point so when on impact, it won't cave, it'll still expand. What's that called?
That is a red polymer flex tip expanding red tip. And sometimes the color changes as well. They do have a pink tip for breast cancer awareness as well.
And that is put in if it's a jacket, if it's a hollow point, it's put in there to make it do what?
So the way that it's advertised by Hornady is, and specifically for a hollow point bullet, is different than a bullet that doesn't have, if a bullet just has a nice round nose and it's encased, that's going to be a full metal jacket. Unless the base of the bullet's also encased, then it's a total metal jacket. So the difference with the hollow point is at the center, the nose isn't complete. It has a cavity in the middle to help facilitate expansion. Hornady will put a polymer tip inside of this hollow point to help control that facilitated expansion as they advertise.
So if it's a Hornady brand, you can actually open the box up and see if it has that pink tip or red tip. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you remember when they started doing that? How long ago?
I do not.
All right, let's get to your report. This is 13. What was requested here?
So the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office and someone from the District Attorney's Office requested a firearms analysis, and they provided all of the fired ammunition that you're going to see in this exhibit. And we had agreed with the customer there was a good bit of ammunition, and they had wanted results a little bit quickly. And then the state of the ammunition was there were different degrees of damage. I believe they were recovered possibly from a tree. And so they had just, when bullets hit something, they can acquire damage. It makes comparison of them difficult. We agreed with the customer that instead of doing a comparison of these items, we would group like items together. We would document their manufactured characteristics. Those are the characteristics that help us determine a list of possible firearms that may have fired bullets. And then we would provide that list. And so basically what the report that was received said what caliber they were, if it could be determined, and then a possible list of firearms that may have fired them, but no comparisons were performed.
Now, ma'am, do you ever have to deal with ADAs that ask you to test lots of stuff?
Yes,
How about law enforcement that says, I need you to test all this stuff?
yes.
Why does the GBI tell us no all the time?
It depends on the circumstances.
Y'all not going to test everything we want, right?
It depends on what questions you're trying to answer. In this specific case, I believe the conversation was, we just really want to know if these items are 38 caliber. And in doing that, with the level of damage these items had sustained that we could see from the packaging, it was, well, once we had, taken a look at them, we're like, well, we can tell you what caliber they are, but they are really damaged. This could take a long time, and time was a factor. We needed results a little bit
So y'all
quicker.
compromised.
We reached an agreement with the customer that we would provide them with a determined type weapon statement rather than a comparative analysis.
It's a very good answer under oath. I like that. Did you get hit with a lot of stuff? How much was it? Let me do this.
So-
This is your report, and
Yes.
there's all this stuff. Did you actually get more than this, but you only tested this?
This was, well, it's possible, but all I have listed under this service are what you see in your list that I would have actually looked at.
So these are the things that no matter how much you got, this is what you end up looking at. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
All right. So tell us what this is.
So this is an evidence list. It looks like there's a lot more, and there definitely is. I received 3 packages, and one of those is my item 33 and 34, and then 35. The first package was 6 357 Magnum cartridges. So a cartridge is a unit of unfired ammunition. So it hasn't been fired. I'm not going to do anything with it except inventory it. And then just skipping down to item 35, that's going to be a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum revolver that I received, basically to see if the manufactured characteristics inside that revolver were consistent with the ammunition that Ms. Kelly looked at the year prior. And then that item 34 package contained several items inside of it that received their own little itemization. So that's why you see the 34A and the 34B. Those are going to be .223 caliber bullets, some 9mm bullets, some bullets and a bullet fragment for which I couldn't determine the caliber, and then some lead fragments as well.
Ma'am, you don't know who Rusty is, do you?
No, sir.
I didn't think you did. So you don't know where that item 35 came from?
The revolver, I do not know where that came from.
Do you know where the other items came from? Besides coming from the sheriff's office?
I have an item source indicated as what was written on their packages, but no, I do not know exactly where they came from.
But you did mention a tree or something like that.
It's possible.
You have a cartridge. Let me see if I can get the the moniker's correct. Cartridge casing is when you take a bullet out of a box, if you would, has not been fired. Is that what you're talking about?
The cartridge is what
That's
you're
the
taking out of
cartridge.
the ammunition box.
The cartridge is what you take out, so it's got everything, the primer, the gunpowder, the projectile, everything on it.
That's correct.
So if it's been fired and there's a casing's laying on the ground, what would you call that?
That's a cartridge case.
So, and then what I call a bullet, you call the tip that goes out, that leaves the casing itself and is projected down. That is the projectile.
I also call it a bullet,
All right.
yes.
So 34A through H, those are 223 bullets.
Yes, sir.
Did you, when it first came in, did you look and go, oh, this is a 223 bullet? You have to actually look under a microscope.
Both.
So you could recognize it?
I can recognize a 223 bullet, but yes, we do take measurements, we weigh it, and then we also look at its just other characteristics. It's just its design characteristics from manufacturer as well.
How different is a 223 and a 5.56?
So they're the same bullet, they're slightly different cartridges. The cartridge itself for a 5.56 by 45 millimeter has an extra grain of powder in it that makes it slightly more, I want to say stronger, faster. Basically, there's an interchangeability issue here. So if you have a firearm that would be chambered for a 5.56, you should only shoot 5.56 because of that extra grain of black powder, increasing that velocity a little bit. And making the chamber a little unsuitable for something that has a lower charge. And a 223 firearm, well, I apologize, I misspoke. The 5.56 can shoot that and the 223, but the 223 doesn't have that extra grain of black powder. Its chamber is not outfitted for all of that power, so it should only shoot 223 caliber, but the bullets are the same.
But that would be what we call an AR rifle.
Yes, they can be 223 and or 5.56 or both.
But for those that don't know guns, 223 bullet is not a handgun round per se.
No, so a 223 cartridge is intended to be fired from a rifle type firearm.
9mm bullet. So it looks like 34I through 34M. That is a handgun bullet.
It is intended to be fired from like a pistol style firearm, yes.
In case people don't know firearms like you do, cowboy gun, revolver, semi-automatic gun is kind of like a Glock or what police carry or something like that. So 9mm, revolver gun, cowboy gun, or semi-automatic.
Traditionally, most commonly it's going to be fired from a pistol, semi-automatic firearm.
And that's the most common is a semi-automatic 9mm.
Yes, sir.
All right, 34N and O just says bullet. Tell us what's going on there.
So for 34N and O, they were, well, for two reasons. They were consistent with a 22 class projectile for which 223 is a family member of, but they were heavily damaged. And I couldn't determine their exact caliber just on their own. So I take each item regardless of what else has been submitted and ask that item, what are you telling me about yourself independent of all other items? So I didn't determine that it was exactly a 223, but it is consistent with the family for which 223 belongs.
Not a handgun.
Not in this case, no.
And then 34P, bullet fragment. What's that?
That is so it's a copper jacketed bullet fragment, which means there was some lead there as well as the outer jacketing material, but it was only a very, very small piece. And it was unsuitable. I know we're going to get there, but it was also unsuitable. So not much I could tell you about it other than it was just a piece of a bullet.
And Q and R and S.
Those were just lead fragments. I have noted for all of them that they are possibly the core of a bullet.
Just go ahead and read your results and conclusion. Then I'm going to ask you to put it in plain English.
Okay, so for the first one, the bullet fragment and lead fragments, items 34F, 34N through 34S, were not suitable for comparison purposes, meaning they possess nothing that I could use for microscopic comparison, had I even been doing that. The next conclusion states that microscopic examination of the bullets, items 34A through 34H, reveals that they are consistent with being fired from AR-15 style 223/5.56 by 45 millimeter firearms. Again, that's not an all-inclusive list. It's only meant to be an investigative lead. The third conclusion states that microscopic examination of the bullets, items 34I and 34K through 34M, reveals that they are consistent with being fired from Astra, Beretta, SIG Arms, Smith & Wesson, and Walther 9mm pistols. Again, not intended to be an all-inclusive list, just an investigative lead. And then finally, the fourth conclusion states that microscopic examination of the bullet, item 34J, reveals it is consistent with being fired from Glock, H&K, IMI, Bursa, and Car Arms 9mm pistols. Again, that's not an all-inclusive list. And then I do have one more conclusion at the end on the next page.
All right.
And that one states, the microscopic examination of the bullets, items 34N and 34O, did not reveal characteristics that could be used to develop a list of possible firearms from which they were fired.
In plain English, can you tell us how that relates to any 38 special bullets or anything like that?
There was no evidence that was suitable, at least, to determine caliber that was consistent with 38 special caliber.
Just all the questions I have.
Good morning, Ms. Bagwell. My
Good
name is
morning.
Michael Ray.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I just have a few questions for you. Let's see where to start. Do you have up there, and you may not, and tell me if you don't, the bullet comparison that Ms. Kelly did?
I do.
And I just want to ask you a couple questions about that. With the bullet that was found in the rib, it doesn't have any grain, or it only has, I believe, I'm sorry, I actually don't have a printout of it either because I'm on the photograph. Under where it says caliber and weights, it doesn't have any weight, correct?
It did have recorded weight, down lower on that page. She has an actual weight that she took of 28.8 grains. The top part of her documentation where it says caliber and weight would be where an examiner records the weight that it's consistent with being for a specific caliber if that determination is being made. There are a couple of weights available in 38 class, so unless it was close to one of those that was manufactured, it would not be provided. It would be like she documented, and it would be a dash.
Okay, so the actual weight of the bullet found in the rib, which is item number 5, is 28 point.
The actual weight is 28.8 grains, yes, sir.
And item number 2, the bullet found in the basement, was 110.
It was 110 grains, yes, sir.
Okay, so Miss Kelly, when she's doing her analysis, she's not able to tell that that is actually a 38. She's having to compare it to the other bullet found in the basement.
That's correct. She had determined it was 38 based on the manufacturer characteristics that were present, which she did document as being consistent with Hornady. In this particular case, she was asked to compare another caliber or another bullet item that was also consistent with Hornady. It was more intact, so it had a weight that was more consistent with the 38 class. So the reason why she would have intercompared them is because they didn't have any disagreement of the available characteristics that were there. So it was saying, basically, I'm consistent with the 38. I just don't have a weight to help support that, but it needed to be compared to the other 38 caliber projectile.
Okay, so basically she's just making the best guess that she can as to what it is, and the manufacturer based on everything that she knows.
So the manufacturer, she would have resources available. We have our reference ammunition collection as well as the standard ammunition file at the lab. So if something does look like, and we are trained in ammunition as well, so if something looks like it's Hornady, she can double check that with all of our resources. So that would be documented, the weight would be recorded, and if it looks like it's a 38 class, then she could document that it appears to be a 38 class, but it wouldn't preclude her from comparing to another 38 class that she had more available to determine its caliber.
Okay, and with the going to the Hornady bullets, I'm going to show you a photograph. You've probably not seen it, but it's already been admitted into evidence, okay? And you just tell me if this is, that's large. This is how, when y'all see, when you look at a well, let me ask you this first. When you look at a bullet, when you're doing your job, you're like, that's a Hornaday bullet.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. But this ain't my first Hornaday rodeo murder trial. And what you look at is you're like, oh, it has that red polymer tip on it, right?
That's one of the features. They also have about 2/3 of the way up that flat surface called the bearing surface. They have what's called a knurled cannular. Other ammunition manufacturers also have it, but the knurled cannular, in addition to hopefully the red polymer tip, but also the structure of those petals in the hollow point, is something that we recognize as being Hornady manufactured.
Okay. And that kernel that you were talking about, is that right here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the petals. Let me approach. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It states GBI ME28. You can, I'm going to open it. You can look in there. Is that, do you see it flared out? Is that the petals you're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You can just switch over to the Elmo. No, it's fine. I can see it. No, I gotta get gloves on. Whole big thing. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do my part, Judge. I'm sorry. It's coming up. Yeah, it's on. While that's loading up, I'll ask you another question. There we go. All right, so like you can
Just set it down and then.
set it down and zoom in. Wrong way. So basically, those little things that are poking out, that's the petals that you had just talked about.
Yes, and they have been peeled up. So the previous photo that you showed is a hollow point, kind of what it looks like when it's hit a target. So the petals that are arranged around the nose have little cuts in them, we just call them slits. And so that's what helps those open up kind of like a flower or a mushroom. So those had been kind of peeled back and were obscuring the bearing surface. So Miss Kelly would have peeled them up so she would have more bearing surface available for comparison.
Okay.
So what you're seeing are they're peeled back up.
Okay, so Miss Kelly would have done that.
Yes.
Okay, so she would have peeled it back up. And actually, is it with Hornaday, and Judge, you can switch back to the TV, please. With Hornaday is because when you look at it closely, you can see that those petals are kind of jagged.
They kind of have like, where they're cut, they have a small interior cut as well before the slit. So, and it's not just Hornady. Other manufacturers have the same kind of petal design, but we've just come to recognize Hornady as having a basic, like a triangle with a flat top and then smaller pieces on the sides.
Okay. How long have you been doing firearm stuff?
Since 2015.
Okay. Do you ever have any bullets that you send off to have textile examination done from a bullet?
No, sir. As far as I know, some of our bullets are swabbed for blood analysis, but not for textile chemistry.
Because there is a report that the GBI had done that's already been admitted into evidence, and I believe that is the GBI number 3, that they did an analysis of the bullet from the basement, stating that there weren't any textiles or any characteristics like that on the bullet.
Then I have learned something new today about some of our services. Yes, that would be a section that's not firearms. So if other sections can look at something for a materials type of service, I don't know who would have done this report, but I guess that's something that they are capable of doing.
This person.
Yes. So I was going to state too that our materials analysts are some of our trace evidence analysts that work on the teeny tiny particles of evidence called trace materials. And Tatiana was one of our trace examiners. So.
And it would make sense if somebody was shot and it went through clothing and, potentially even exited through clothing, that you could pick up textiles on it. Okay?
Yes. And now that you mention it, I believe I just misunderstood the question initially, because we did have something recently where Trace asked us to come over and look and see if they could do a general materials on it. So I just seem to have forgotten that.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I brought it back to you.
Thank you.
Well, unfortunately, now you got something else that you have to do at work. Okay. Now, you had mentioned that these Hornady bullets that, with Mr. Focus, that these are premium brand bullets.
I would consider it a premium line of ammunition.
And a lot of times you can tell like what's premium and what's not premium by the casing of whether or not it's like the brass or it's nickel or things like that.
It's more commonly for us going to be the design of the bullet itself and independent of the cartridge case and what material it's made of.
And in states number GBI number 13, all of those different bullets that you had looked at, were you aware that those came from like a target area at a piece of property?
No, I wasn't really aware of exactly where they came from.
Were you more curious as to why you were getting a whole bag of bullets?
It was a question that I had asked, yes.
And anything that Mr. Fogus had asked you about this 357 here, you don't know anything about it, and there was no testing done on it to your knowledge?
All I did was a visual examination of it. I didn't do any comparison on my report, and then I did inform the customer that it did have a different rifling structure, so a different manufacturing characteristics than the bullets that Miss Kelly had previously examined.
Yeah, and I'll come back to that, but so that's a Smith & Wesson 357.
It is.
Right? Okay. And well, hold on. Before we do that. So of all the bullets and everything and the fragments that you looked up here, you didn't see any Hornady bullets at the target range? At least that you noted in your report.
In my report, we don't note ammunition manufacturer, so that information would be in my bench notes. And I believe just purely based on the level of damage everything sustained, I was not able to determine probable manufacturers for any of the items that I received.
Okay, that's fine. And but in your training and experience with Hornady being a premium brand, that's not a target shooting brand, right?
Not traditionally, no.
Okay. And in fact, I believe you have stated that that brand is geared toward law enforcement.
Some lines, but some lines are specific for civilians as well.
Okay. So, okay. So in this report, you had noticed there was a Smith & Wesson that somebody had sent you. We don't know whose it is yet.
Right.
All right. And then in your other report, or not your report, Ms. Kelly's report, that she had believed that it was a FIE, Arminus, Titan, those types of guns.
That's correct.
And that's because of the twist. I believe those type of guns have an 8-right twist.
The guns in the list that Ms. Kelly provided, those specifically came up in the database because they have 8 lays and grooves that turn to the right. And she also measured them as well because they have specified widths at manufacturer. So if we know those widths, we can see those measurements come back in the list of manufacturers that are provided. And then the Smith & Wesson that was submitted, that revolver had 5 lands and grooves.
Okay. And with, because Mr. Fogus had asked you about that 357 Magnum is not listed in this group. And you don't have a reason as to why that is not, right?
I do not.
Okay, because a 357 can shoot a 38.
It can.
Right. Now, but a 38 can't shoot a 357.
It should not.
Okay. Okay, that's what I thought. And this listing of firearms is not all inclusive.
Correct.
And to the best of your knowledge, does FIE, Arminus, and Titan, we'll just use those because they're on the report, do they make a 357?
I really can't recall that off the top of my head.
Okay. And with the, what is RG 38 Special Derringers? Can you explain what that is?
Yes. So RG is just another firearm manufacturer, and the 38 Special Derringer is the same caliber, 38 Special, except the firearm type is a little bit different. People tend to classify a Derringer as a type of revolver. Others tend to classify as a type of pistol. Really, the definition for it is just a very small gun designed to shoot 2 cartridges. It's like a pocket gun. It's very small, should fit in the palm of your hand, and typically it has 1 to 2 chambers. Sometimes it can have up to 4.
Okay, and that's a Derringer.
Yes.
But it's not a revolver.
It's not a revolver because it doesn't have a cylinder that rotates. A revolver has a cylinder that rotates, and a Derringer does not have a cylinder that rotates.
Okay. And no further questions. Thank you.
I'm just gonna make it 12.1. Judge, I'm going to tender now by agreement GBI DOFS 12.1. It goes with the report 12. So we'll tender that into evidence.
All right.
Thank you. Ma'am, I probably caused this computer to crash, but let's see if I can. No objection. Publish it. We were talking about the bullet worksheet. Oh my goodness, I can't see that. Let me just break it down a little bit. And this is Miss Kelly's. What is this? Do y'all have these when y'all you take notes and type some stuff up? Is that what you do?
Yes, this is a part of our bench notes. So anytime we have projectile evidence, we put it on our bullet worksheet.
And then when we were going through this, I think, so what we're looking at here is GBI item 2 and GBI item 5. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And 2 is the projectile from the basement floor, and 5 is from the autopsy. So 2 is from the floor, and then it says right there, ME box labeled UID.
Yes, sir.
All right, tell us what this caliber and weights and grains. What are we talking about here?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The caliber and
Oh.
weight. We have. What does this line mean?
That line is actually, it's pretty high up on the list because that's one of the first things you want your peer reviewer to see, but you don't fill that one in right from the get-go. You've done some analysis further down on the worksheet first. So that whole line that says caliber and weight in grains is what you have determined the caliber to be based on the available characteristics, and then the weight that it's most consistent with being within that caliber family.
And I think maybe early on there was a question whether or not this was a 380 bullet. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that.
But ultimately, the final opinion was this is a 38 special. There's 2 bullets, obviously, but one is they both come back to 38 Hornady type bullets. Is that right?
Yes, 38 class Hornady type bullets.
And did you know that the GBI item 5 that was involved in a burning or a fire?
I did not.
Okay, so you don't know the source of that or where it's from or anything?
As Miss Kelly's peer reviewer, all I saw was the documentation that said UID, so we didn't even have, at that time during her analysis, an identity for that individual.
But as you said earlier, sometimes you get bullets and they're deformed or messed up, and that could be from the conditions of where it was.
Yes.
All right, then what else do we have on here? Problem manufacturer. So you got item 2 and 5. What are we talking about here?
That would be who it's consistent with based on its design characteristics. So for the first column where it says Hornady with a red polymer tip and a knurled cannula is kind of what I described in the photographs that were shown. It's consistent with Hornady based on those features. And then the other column, it says it's consistent with Hornady, but she only remarked one knurled cannula. It had to be similar to the other items, knurled cannula and appearance, because it wasn't basically saying I'm different. It's saying I'm similar. I could be Hornady as well.
And I always want to say lanes, like a bowling lane and grooves, but it's lands and grooves and twists. What is that?
So when a barrel is manufactured by a fire manufacturer, what is cut into the barrel are actually grooves, and they are cut into a spiral pattern. So as the bullet passes down the barrel, it imparts spin on the bullet to help improve the bullet's accuracy upon leaving the barrel. When the grooves are cut into the barrel, they leave the grooves, but the spaces between the grooves are the lands. And when the bullet passes down the barrel, it picks up impressions from the grooves and impressions from the lands.
And then damage for item 2, which is from the basement, item 5, which is from the ME. It is noted some damage to item 5. Is that right?
Yes.
Let's see. And then again, the match goes up to the 38 special Hornady bullet. And that's item 2, item 5. Both of those are Hornady brand. Is that right?
Item 2, she determined is Hornady brand, and then item 5, she said it's consistent with Hornady, not to exclude other manufacturers, but it's more consistent with Hornady, or else she would not have documented it that way.
Right. And Mr. Ray said that it was a guess, and I think I know what he's saying about that, but y'all don't guess at your job, do you?
No, we use what's available to make us, what we have available in data to provide us with conclusions. So instead of just saying Hornady, she put consistent with Hornady, meaning it's not inconsistent with other manufacturers, it's more consistent with Hornady, but I wouldn't quote unquote die on this hill that it is Hornady. She also included a note stating at the bottom of that worksheet, it's more consistent with Hornady than other calibers within the 38 class family.
That's because you're a scientist, right?
Yes, sir.
That's because us lawyers ask you questions and you just can say what the science holds. Is that true?
That's all I can say. Yes, sir.
I mean, you're not in this business to say something for this side or something for this side, right?
No.
I mean, if I told you to say something, you're going to tell me to go jump in the lake, right? If it was not consistent with the science,
I
probably
would
kindly
say
you're going
it a little bit nicer, yes.
Right, but you're not going to just agree with me because I work for the state. Is that true?
No, sir. We can be called as witnesses for either side.
And you can, and have disagreed with prosecutors before?
I'm sorry.
Have you ever disagreed with the prosecutor?
Perhaps just last week. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, these brands that we have here, FIE, Arminus, Titan, some of these brands, it's not a Springfield. Is that right?
That's right.
It's not Smith & Wesson. Is that right?
Not in this particular list. That's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's not a Glock.
No.
It's not some type of well-known or other type of brand. These are a particular brand. Are these less common known than others?
Yes, I would say out of that list, the ones that I've personally seen in casework the most are the Arminius brand revolvers.
And are those top shelf guns, middle shelf guns, low shelf? By low shelf, you know what a high point is, right?
Yes, sir.
Is high point a very cheap gun?
It is.
All right, then you got, what's the most expensive type of gun you think is out there right now, pistol-wise?
Well, typically the most expensive guns that we receive in casework are going to be those that are owned by our officers.
So a nice Glock or something like that.
Or like
Kimber
a nice Delton rifle, for example.
So
Not an
these-
Arminius revolver.
Where do these brands fall in? Top shelf, middle shelf, bottom shelf?
I can only speak for Arminius because I've seen that the most in my personal experience. It's a very cheaply made revolver.
Are you familiar with the other ones, where they all fall?
I've seen them, but those are mostly from our reference collection, which have been handled by a lot of trainees. So they're not in the best shape either, but I don't know if that's a result of their poor manufacturing or all of our handling of them.
Now, to be clear, this GBI item 35, this Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum, that is not consistent with the item GBI item 2 and 5. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Just with the, well, basically, here's what it really boils down to. You can tell me if you agree. Is y'all don't know what kind of gun was used to fire these bullets, right?
That's correct.
Okay, there we go. The easy way to solve that problem. So we don't know that. And going to the, no, not photograph. Where's the comparison at?
It's 12.1. If you go to the file.
No, I got it. All right, going into the comparison. With the section of damage, some expansion of HP. What do you mean by HP?
HP is our acronym for hollow point.
You got to say that. You said it so fast.
I'm sorry. HP is our acronym for hollow point.
Okay, so some damage to a hollow point.
Some expansion to the hollow point, which is what we would expect when a hollow point is fired. However, we have seen hollow points that experienced no expansion, in which case, if there was no other damage to that projectile, we wouldn't have anything documented there.
In your opinion, looking at this photo, which is Thrasher 287, is that limited damage, limited expansion?
Yes.
Okay. And also, there's this part in your report. Let's see, the weight is 110 grains, 38 special Hornady bullet, even though we've already established that item 2 is believed to be a Hornady. Item 5, possibly a Hornady because of item 2. Fair?
It's possible.
And other characteristics.
Yes, it's other manufacturing characteristics. And she did have two that she could put side by side, which helped her along with our resources where we would see how much or what a 110 grain Hornady 38 special looked like, she would have been able to do that side-by-side comparison and see that it is more consistent with that than any others. But it's just consistent with that because she was not certain that that is what it was.
Okay. And then last thing is the report also, or the bench notes, also BS longer than 380. Is that trying to say that, trying to exclude 380?
Yes.
What's BS?
It's the bearing surface, and that length varies depending on the caliber. So 380 bearing surfaces are a lot shorter when compared to the bearing surface of a 38 class, like a 38 special bullet.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
I'm done, Judge.
All right, I got a couple. All right, that last report. So when the other experts have testified, we have heard a lot of consistent with X or consistent with Y. Okay, for example, this is consistent with blood, but hasn't been identified as blood yet. Okay, another testimony. All right. Now, the report comparing the two 38 bullets, the one that was indicated that was found in the ribs in the fire, and the bullet that was indicated that it was found in on the floor. The report says they are identical.
Yes, Your Honor.
They were fired from the same gun.
Yes, that's going to be based on their characteristics that they picked up from the firing process from the same firearm. So those two items, whether one is Hornady and the other is not Hornady, they were fired from the same firearm, but the ammunition itself might be two different manufacturers.
All right, so that's not a consistent with, that is it's from the same thing. That's a certainty.
Yes, that's an identification statement.
All right. Now, I was going to go back, so you kind of covered the Hornady thing. Was there additional analysis that could have been done to determine whether those were the same? The composition of the bullets was the same and therefore the same manufacturer?
In terms of firearms analysis at the lab, what we're going to do is document those design characteristics and their probable manufacturer, but that's where it stops for us.
So y'all don't, that would require additional testing from someone who would do it on a molecular level, or could you not compare it with the microscope?
Well, we do put ammunition side by side on the scope, or we can, to see if those ammunition manufacturing characteristics are the same, but with damage as well, it kind of makes just seeing those manufactured characteristics hard to compare as well.
So that was my next question. So the issue with the determination whether the bullets are the same manufacturer is based upon the condition of the second bullet.
It's possible, yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I think everyone knows, but I don't think you said specifically, but what's the point of what's the purpose of a hollow point?
So the hollow point, as it's advertised by ammunition manufacturers that make hollow point ammunition, is for that facilitated expansion. It is advertised by the manufacturer that it's a greater stopping power for that type of projectile.
All right, so you don't necessarily, the GBI doesn't take a position on whether that's accurate or not?
That's correct.
All right, now my understanding is that the bullet then expands, right?
Yes, sir.
Upon impact,
Yes.
and then creates more damage. Is that fair? Or maybe not, depends on what it hits, would depend on the amount of damage, but can cause a larger pathway through the object that it strikes.
Yes, I have seen, and we have had Hornady come to the lab to do some test fires in ballistic gelatin. So when you consider ballistic gelatin, that I have seen personally in my experience, a full metal jacketed bullet that doesn't have a center cavity in the nose travels a little bit farther, and the path is a little bit more narrow. And the hollow point bullet travels not nearly as far, stops a lot sooner because it's been expanded to stop, and then the area around that path is a bit larger.
All right, and along with those lines, you compare, have you done other comparisons with projectiles for the amount of damage or path or something similar to that, where you can see the difference between other rounds?
No, sir. The only reason I said what I just said was based on them coming and providing us with a lecture on their new lines of ammunition. So at the GBI, we don't worry about anything with ballistic gelatin. Just when we have the opportunity to see it, would I be able to make a statement on it?
If a projectile, if a hollow tip and then the purpose of the polymer tip is to keep it spiraling longer and then cause the spread more, or it's just
It's difficult to say. The ammunition.
it may have some purpose, but it also may be a marketing gimmick.
Right. So that's why I state that that's how the manufacturer advertises. What the purpose of that flex tip is more controlled expansion of that hollow point.
All right. If a hollow point bullet were to enter into a body and exit that body, what would the resulting exit wound probably look like?
I'm afraid I can't testify to
All
that.
right. That would be somebody else's department.
Yes, sir.
Now, your original premise, getting the big packet of stuff from either the investigators, detectives, DA's office, whoever. I anticipate you got sent a big bag of bullets and said, hey, do any of these match the 38s?
That was the initial premise
All
for
right.
receiving that from the
And
sheriff's
you
office.
said, if y'all want me to do that, you, meaning the GBI,
Right.
y'all said, okay, then we have to pull out each bullet, put it under the microscope, compare it with all the other two known bullets to see if they match. We can probably do that with an eyeball test saying, hey, that's a 223 by sight, and then I don't have to go into the microscope and examine the bullet.
Well, so actually, I did put every item under the microscope. I just didn't do a side-by-side
Right,
comparison between any items. So
right. You
the
still did your
initial-
analysis on each bullet to say what it was, but
Correct.
you didn't then compare it to the other two bullets.
Right. So the question, like you asked earlier, was, are any of these 38 caliber? So at the time, the agreement with the assistant manager of the firearms section and the customer, Mr. Clifford Broughton at the district attorney's office.
Let's make sure they're
Was-
not 38s first before I do any under the microscope
Right.
side-by-side analysis.
Was that we agreed that we would determine the caliber and provide a DTW, which is a determined type weapon, for the bullets, but that we would not do a comparison at this time.
And then if any of those came back as 38s, then you would go to the next stage potentially of looking at them.
I'm uncertain because that didn't
Didn't
happen.
happen.
Right.
All right. All right. Based upon my questions, anyone else have any follow-ups? All right. You can sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I always enjoy learning something here. All right. Let's take a break and we'll start back at 11ish.